Lightroom offers powerful tools for managing, optimizing, and sharing your images. However, in some cases, you'll want to leverage Photoshop to apply more advanced adjustments to your images. Lightroom supports a round-trip workflow with Photoshop, and in this lesson, I'll show you how to make the most of just such a workflow. Before you actually dive into sending an image from Lightroom over to Photoshop, you'll want to check your preferences for external editing. To do so, in Windows, choose Edit from the menu. On the Macintosh, this would be on the Lightroom menu. Then choose Preferences and click on the External Editing tab. The settings we recommend for most users are a file format of TIFF, ProPhoto RGB for the color space, and 16 bits per component for the bit depth. The resolution is purely a matter of preference. We tend to use 360 on the assumption that we'll be sending these images to a photo inkjet printer, but any value is perfectly fine. For compression, we use zip simply to reduce the file size. Once you've confirmed these settings or established your own preferred settings, you can click OK to close the Preferences dialog. To actually send the image to Photoshop, you can choose Photo, Edit in, and then Open as Smart Object in Photoshop. It's very important that you use the Smart Object option rather than the Edit option. Note that you can also access this option by right-clicking, or on the Macintosh, control-clicking on the image itself and then choosing Edit in, Open as Smart Object in Photoshop. When you do so, the image from Lightroom will be sent to Photoshop. If Photoshop is not already running, it will automatically be launched. Note, as indicated by the icon in the bottom right corner of the thumbnail for our image on the Layers panel, that this is a smart object. That means we're not really working on the original image, but rather working on a copy that we're referencing. At this point, you could use any of the tools in Photoshop to optimize this image. In this case, I'm simply going to add a couple of adjustment layers just to demonstrate the concepts involved. So I'll add a curves adjustment and perhaps increase contrast just a little bit, and maybe add a vibrance adjustment and increase the overall color intensity in the image. In this case, obviously, my adjustments are very simple, which really didn't call for Photoshop at all, but I just want to demonstrate the concepts rather than spend a lot of time working on this particular image right now. Once you've finished applying any of your adjustments, simply choose File, Save to update the image with all of its layers, and then choose File, Close. At this point, we can switch back to Lightroom, and as you can see, the file we were working on in Photoshop is now in a stack with the original image. You'll observe that above the row of thumbnails on the film strip, the file name is shown, and this is one indication you have that the image on the right in this case is the original raw capture, and the image on the left is the layered file that I created in Photoshop. One thing that's very important to keep in mind is that from this point forward, you really should not use Lightroom to optimize this image. The reason is that you would then lose the ability to retain both your Lightroom adjustments and your Photoshop adjustments. If you want to apply any changes to the appearance of the image, you should do so in Photoshop. But that actually doesn't mean that you're losing the ability to adjust your original Lightroom adjustments or to add additional Lightroom adjustments. However, those adjustments need to now be applied using Adobe Camera Raw from within Photoshop. That will actually allow you to apply the exact same adjustments you could otherwise have applied through Lightroom's Develop module. To apply any further adjustments in the future, therefore, instead of using the Develop module in Lightroom, you'll need to right-click on your image and then choose Edit in Adobe Photoshop. Keep in mind, originally it was important to open the image as a smart object, but that was only the first time we opened the image. From that point forward, we'll want to edit in Adobe Photoshop. When you choose this option, a dialog will appear with several choices. You could edit a copy with the Lightroom adjustments intact, edit a copy of the original without the Lightroom adjustments, or edit the original. In this case, we need to choose the Edit Original option. This will allow us to edit the layered file that we created as a smart object from Lightroom. When I choose this option and click Edit, the image will be opened in Photoshop. Notice that all of my layers are still intact. I can continue to add additional adjustment layers if I'd like to, or I can refine the Lightroom adjustments by double-clicking on the thumbnail for my image at the bottom of the Layers panel. When I do so, the Adobe Camera Raw dialog will appear where I can apply any adjustments I'd like. Note that all of these adjustments relate to the actual adjustments that are found within Lightroom. As a result, I can use Adobe Camera Raw to apply what would have otherwise been Lightroom adjustments, and I can use Photoshop to apply any other specialty adjustments. Once I've applied all of my changes, Once again, I'll need to choose File, Save to refresh the saved file, and then File, Close. Now switching to Lightroom, we'll see the image is there and has been updated based on whatever changes we've applied in Photoshop. With a proper approach to your workflow, you can put the power of Photoshop to use along with the strength of Lightroom's image management capabilities, as you've seen in this lesson.